Shawn, welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
Mark, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
No, it's great. I know you're going to bring positive energy to the table. You're all like spaced out literally behind you there, which is really cool. We know your name for sure and your company. I'm not sure we have to do any introductions, but let's do that. If you can briefly introduce yourself, we'll get to the business part, but who you are, where you're from, where you are now, a little bit about your family, or a lot about your family if you want. Something you've never told anybody else you want to reveal now to the world. You can do that too. Favorite color, whatever. Share with us a little bit.
Sure. No, my name is Shawn Olds. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Boodle AI. I started my career in the military. I attended West Point and went into service after that. As any good lieutenant graduating out of West Point, I knew my entire career path from platoon leader to the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. Unfortunately, I ran into, about 4 years into my service, a plane made by the lowest bidder with a parachute made by the lowest bidder, and the two didn't work out so well for me. And so ended up getting medicaled out of the military and had to find my way into the private sector. And just very good fortune, kind of found myself into the entrepreneurial space, which I've pretty much stuck with since I got out of the military, with an exception of a brief respite after September 11th. I went back into government service, working with various parts of the government doing counterterrorism work, spending most of my time in Southwest Asia and Africa. But after that time, came back, went to grad school, and went back into building companies. One of the first companies I built was actually overseas. So I spent 8 years in the Middle East and Africa, and then came back several years ago to build Boodle. The genesis of Boodle being, during that entire career path, one of the things that I've also done for 25 years is I've always served on some sort of nonprofit board. Started out in youth education, which I'm very passionate about. And for 25 years, I've always served on some sort of youth education board. After my time in the military, also made sense to work with veteran service organizations. And so Boodle, which I founded 6 years ago, was to bring technology and data science to nonprofits in an easily consumable manner. I jokingly say I did it because I'm lazy. I've spent 25 years banging my head against the wall, trying to help nonprofits raise money, and it's many times ineffective and inefficient. And I just didn't want the next 25 years of my board service to continue to bruise my forehead. So try to create a technology that would make it easier.
So, Jay Leno used to say to Robin Williams, all I have to do is say, hey, Robin, and the rest is history. So the sequel of Robin just happened, folks. And tell us a little bit about your family.
I've got an amazing wife who puts up with way too much more than she probably should. My wife is from your neck of the woods. She grew up in Los Angeles, went to both undergrad and law school up in the Bay Area. And I jokingly say we met on the internet. We were introduced through a woman who was her best friends in second grade, and a woman I served on my first nonprofit board with. And so she introduced the two of us via email, which technically was the internet. But we met, dated for a while, engaged for a while, and then finally married. And she followed me over to the Middle East. And while we were there, we had our first daughter, and she is now 9. And we have a little boy who's 4. And I would be happy on another call to get into the nature versus nurture argument, because they are two entirely different children. So.
Yeah, no kidding. But I will tell you, I got 3 boys, all in their 20s and early 30 now, and it goes fast, as I'm sure we all hear. But when it really goes fast, you get it. And so cherish every moment, because it's the best thing. It's the best thing ever. So you don't want to reveal anything you've never told anybody else. Is that it?
I'm a pretty open book, so I don't know what I haven't told people yet.
Okay, well, tell us then what you were like as a kid and a teenager. Did you watch a lot of Army movies? Were you like Michael J. Fox on Family Ties with business investment? Did you play sports, music? What were you like?
Yeah, I was definitely more the entrepreneurial route. I always knew I was going into the Army. My dad was a career military officer. He was born and raised in Hawaii. I don't look it. My dad's 5 generations Hawaiian.
Wow.
I go to family reunions. People think I'm the hired help because I don't look like anybody else in the family. But my dad left the islands to go to college at University of San Francisco, good Jesuit school, and did ROTC while he was there. And so he entered the military in the midst of the Vietnam War. married my mother, and then went off to Vietnam for a year. And then when he came back, I grew up in a military household. And so I knew, a lot of people talk about, whether their kids will go to college or not. I didn't have a choice. I knew I was going to college. It was a foregone conclusion, but I also knew I was going to do ROTC like my dad, and I knew I was going to go into the Army. That being said, I was always a curious kid. And so, and I always liked finer things maybe. And so always knew I needed to find a way to make more money. And so in high school, I actually did a sophomore project on real estate investment, both commercial and residential real estate, and actually partnered with an individual who was pretty big in that space, one of my classmates' fathers, and really learned the ins and outs to get further and further. It didn't assuage me of wanting to be in the military. I just wanted to try and figure out how to do both. And so even at my time at West Point, I joined the finance club so I could figure out with what little money the military pays you, how I could invest it and make a heck of a lot more while still serving the country.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you knew where you were going school wise, and then you went back to education. You got an MBA and a JD.
Mm-hmm.
What intrigued you on those?
Yeah, and to be clear, I actually did not want to go to West Point. I grew up wanting to do ROTC. My dad was stationed most of his career after Vietnam, was stationed with the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg. And my mother was a nurse, and the best medical center nearby was Duke Medical Center. And so I grew up watching Duke and going up to Duke and seeing it. And I wanted to go to Duke and wanted to do ROTC. And I grew up in a household where, as I mentioned earlier, my father's a good Catholic. I think I heard him use the F word 4 times growing up, and every single time it was followed by the word ring knocker. My dad actually did not like West Pointers until he became a battalion commander, and he worked for one who he had great respect for, a wonderful gentleman, graduated West Point in 1956. His name was General J.D. Smith, and was just a wonderful mentor to my father. And my father was the one who actually guided me towards applying to West Point, actually bribed me into applying. I knew nothing about it. I thought it was a 4-year boot camp. I didn't even know it was a real college.
Right.
And I applied because my dad's bribe was good enough. But I also applied to Duke and ROTC, and that's where I was going to go.
Super, super cool. Before we get more into some of your places you've worked, veterans are often, I find in what I do, veterans are often stereotyped into thinking, well, you're good leaders, you're good at like mission focused, you must be good at logistics, and not often given the opportunity to have the wider breadth of things that can be achieved by people that have those qualifications. Share with us a little bit of how you saw yourself and what the differentiation you see in men and women have to offer, entering the private sector.
Sure. So, I mean, one of the things that has happened over the past probably 20 years, they were at their advent when I got out, was the creation of firms that help guide military veterans. And now there are a series of nonprofits that also do it. There's still for-profit companies, and they really help not only guide a veteran to, hey, this on your resume I know sounded really impressive when you were in the military. It doesn't sound impressive or resonate with a private sector. Here's how you translate that. At the same time, these firms spend a lot of time working with corporate America, explaining beyond leadership what a military veteran has done and what they've learned and how valuable they can be. And so that has made that transition process a lot easier. It's still not simple, but it's definitely made it easier than it was, say, in the 80s, before I was even trying to transition out of the military. What I have found, and it's interesting because a lot of people will say, oh yeah, military veterans, they're natural entrepreneurs, they're risk takers, right? Like, if you're willing to go into combat, you must be a risk taker. And the reality is, veterans are willing to risk their lives. They're not willing to risk their families' lives. A veteran goes into combat knowing that if they die, their family's taken care of for the rest of their lives. Their family will get a paycheck, their family will get medical care. So their family is safe back home in the United States, and they're willing to take those risks because there's that safety factor there. When they transition out and your family's health care is at risk, your kids' schooling is at risk, their ability to eat or have a house, veterans become a lot less willing to risk their families' lives when it's their own. And so I find that a lot of the veteran entrepreneurs actually tend to be single. They're still willing to take that risk because if everything goes wrong, it's just me. I don't have a spouse. I don't have a child that I need to worry about. And at the point where they hit that, they tend to look for a little bit safer jobs, if you will, things that are in corporate America. What I see amongst veterans, you're absolutely right. They tend to be good leaders. I walked into at 21, my first platoon had 52 men and women in it between the ages of 16 and 41. And I was 21 years old leading them. I didn't have that leadership challenge again for another 15 years. And so it gives you opportunities, but the reality is veterans definitely bring a sense of discipline. They bring a sense of being able to inspire people, which, I think is a little bit different than leadership. And inspiration is definitely part of leadership, but not all leaders can really inspire people. And when you've got to sit down with a person and convince them to follow you into combat, you've really got to figure out how to inspire people properly.
Yeah, I compare a lot of things to sports, and certainly sports isn't anywhere as heavy as going into combat, but you're kind of going into the different type of combat. And I remember Mark Messier. I'm a big hockey fan. Big guy, is a leader. There's leadership awards named after him, and he had told us that he went one of his teammates once. He went eye to eye with him, and Messier's a big guy, and he brings eye to eye. And he said, "Look, we need you on this team to win the championship. What you bring to this team is so valuable. It'll help us win the championship. I just got to know you're in 150%, because if you're not, we don't need you here." And it was inspirational. And the guy's thinking, "Oh my God, he does really believe in me." And he's also thinking, "Oh my God, I got to do this," type of thing.
But one of the close analogies to sports and the military is in sports, in the military, you practice and you practice and you fail a lot, right? You fail. Not every practice goes well. But you have that discipline to continue to try, to continue to understand new ways to approach the task that you've ultimately got to accomplish.
Right.
And I think when you've got that, you're willing, in the business space, you're willing to fail. Failure is not, we have a big poster in our office that says failing is not failure. I tell everybody on my team, you want to fail at something, go ahead, just don't fail at something twice. But if you're going to fail fast, figure out a way around it, and then do what's going to work.
Yeah, fail fast for sure. And we would always say, if you lost a game, you're not a loser. You just lost the game.
Right.
And no one should be a loser. We focus on a lot to what you said, their experiences in what we do more than years of experience. Mm-hmm. And can you describe the experience you had with companies like PRTM and TAQA and the Bellow Wood Group, in terms of vision, in terms of the investment and the economic and social impact that was made, with all types of relationships you had in those companies?
Sure. So, and what's been fun is every experience lends something different. And your point on it's not necessarily years of experience as it is the experience itself. So my time at PRTM was very limited. It was 2 years. PRTM, after I left, got acquired by PwC. What was impactful for me there was a couple of things. I got to play both in the government space because they were building a government practice, but they were also building a private equity practice. And so I got to help with the private equity practice as well. Mm-hmm. I am still close with over a dozen people from that firm. And those people have very varied experiences. And so not only in my experience in working with them over 2 years, but in the, now almost 20 years subsequent to working with them, I've been learning every year because I've seen them branch out into other areas and I get to learn vicariously through the things that they're doing. We met through one of those individuals, who I consider one of the top 5 professionals I've ever worked with in my entire life. I have modeled a lot of not just my leadership, but just my general business approach after watching her and what she did and what she's done through the years. Yeah. She's become a resource for me in many times when I just need to bounce ideas. And so, that while one of my shortest professional experiences, in many ways has been one of the most profound outside of my time in the military. At the same time, I'm been in a company I started 6 years ago. And what's fascinating is I get to learn every day. The one of the things I always got taught early on is always surround yourself by people that are smarter than you. In my case, as a dumb Army Ranger, that's a low bar, so it's easy for me
I'm
to
with you
do
on
that.
my baseline too.
So, but I have some just wonderful people that I'm surrounded by. My co-founder, who is actually a year behind me at West Point, is just an amazing human being who almost on a daily basis I get to learn from. I hired in a woman as our chief data officer who, did not have the years of experience you might want for a chief data officer, but she interviewed amazingly and just expressed an understanding for what we needed to do. And it has paid off for every year we've had her. And every day I learn from her. Sometimes she probably gets a little annoyed with the number of questions I ping her with, but I get to learn every day from that. And so, and then the investments, the angel investments my wife and I have made along the way, have also been very instructive. I tend to go into companies where I understand the space, but I may not understand the particular technology. So I'm pretty deep in right now with another West Point grad, someone who's older than me. I worked with him in the Middle East. He had retired and then decided that he wanted with his son to start a business around gas measurement. Now, I understand the thesis of gas measurement. I hired a lot of gas measurement companies when I was working with Taka in the Middle East because we did oil and gas, but I never had to drill down to really understand the technology. And he has invented a revolutionary technology that cuts the time and the cost to do this and does it in a better way to help the environment. And it's been fascinating over the past 2 years advising him. I'm able to give him a lot of insights in building a business, starting a business, raising money, all of that. But at the same time, I've been able to dig into the gas measurement space in a way I never would have otherwise. And so it's just being able to constantly learn has been exciting.
Yes, well, you've obviously developed some savvy and instinct even in what to invest in. Are you talking about Fractal? Is that the one you're?
No, this one actually is called Foresight.
Oh, Foresight. Okay.
Yeah, Fractal was very much in the cyberspace, founded by two brilliant academy grads. One was a West Point grad, one was an Air Force Academy grad. And they were both PhDs in leagues above me in terms of intellect. And so being able to surround yourself by someone like that and just learn from it is an amazing opportunity. But Foresight is a more recent investment that we've done, and one which has just been fascinating to learn the space.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that all led to co-founding and leading as the CEO of Boodle AI, as you said. Tell us a little bit about the time you had in how it came about to even co-found the company, and more about what it's about and where it's going and the impact you're looking to make.
Yes, the founding of it, my wife was not entirely happy with, because I was living in Abu Dhabi at the time. I had an offer to go to Singapore for a very cush and fun job, running basically the venture arm for a very westernized Chinese billionaire who was moving all of his assets offshore. And my wife was very excited about it. I traveled back to the US for one of the angel investments my wife and I had made, for a meeting. And on my way out, my now co-founder found out I was in town. As I mentioned, my co-founder and I had gone to West Point. We didn't know each other there. We actually met after graduation in the U.S. Army Ranger School. We were actually Ranger buddies, and we stayed in touch over the years.
Cool.
And he said, "Hey, I've got an idea." And he pitched me on Boodle, using technology, specifically data science and machine learning, to help nonprofits raise money.
Mm-hmm.
And as I sat at lunch with him before I was headed to Dulles to catch my flight back to Abu Dhabi, I told him, I said, "This is a brilliant idea. Cindy and I would invest in it, and I can think of other people who would invest. And I can tell you a variety of clients that I could line up." And at the time, my co-founder was running a law firm he had started, and simultaneously was the chief strategy officer for an aerospace company he had started.
Mm-hmm.
So he had his hands full, and he said, yeah. The reason I wanted to meet with you is I really need to find a CEO. I can't run this. And I said to him, I said, "Well, I got a 15-hour flight back to Abu Dhabi. I'll hop on LinkedIn. I'll have a dozen names for you." And he's like, "Yeah, I was actually thinking maybe you could be the CEO." And I did the, oh, I appreciate it, very flattering, but I'm going to go do this great job in Singapore. And he continued to put the pressure on, and the more he did and the more I thought about it, it was a calling. This was something I was passionate about. It's something that, I know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to stay tied to nonprofit boards for the rest of my life. And why not create a tool to make the work I'm going to do as a board member easier? And so, as far as answering your question on, what's the path forward, I want to get this technology into the hands of as many nonprofits as we can. And so whether we grow organically or whether we end up partnering with firms along the way to do that, what we want to do is make sure that as many nonprofits as possible, because they're always operating on lean budgets. They will never be able to afford to hire teams of data scientists. And so whatever we can do to get this tool into their hands so that their development teams can do what they're good at, which is raising new money and stewarding the donors they have, we want to make that easier for them.
No, that's awesome. So your wife took the job with the Chinese billionaire. Is that it?
I wish. I wish.
Was he or she disappointed?
A little bit, but a job like that's not hard to find someone to replace. It was a good opportunity.
Yeah, I like the idea of competing with us when you've got 10 calls to get 10 CEOs. That's not very nice, actually. but good way to go. So we founded Fifth Element on the basis that leaders and businesses can do way better when they're doing good, and that's exactly what you're doing with your company, basically with nonprofits. Describe how you balance getting the solid economic results while making a positive social impact. It's not always easy for people to do that. For both your firm and even your clients, how it impacts your employees and their families and community in general.
So one of the things, obviously the focus of what we do is focused on nonprofits. We got pulled into the commercial sector as well by marketing teams and sales teams pretty quickly. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't just relying on the fact that we sell to nonprofits, that we were doing good that way. And so very early on, my co-founder and I created what we call our 5-4-3-2-1 pledge. And it was semi-founded or stolen, whatever you want to call it, borrowed from the 1% pledge that exists. And so there's a 1% pledge organization, which we're a part of, which asks founders and company CEOs to dedicate either 1% of their equity, I think it's 1% of their profits, and there's another 1% they can offer to join this 1% club. And when I got introduced to it early on in the founding of the company, I went back to my co-founder. I'm like, we've got to be able to do more. And so what we did is we created 5-4-3-2-1. And the 5% is that 5% of our profits go back to nonprofits. We donate them back. We created a corporate DAF, and we take 5% of our profits, put it in there. And then to not just make it a unilateral thing, we allow the team to help guide us. We have the team, like, who do you think? Is it amongst our clients? Is it a organization you're passionate about? Like, what is it that we should be donating to? 4 is 4 times a year, we do a webinar of some sort, because we've got pretty good networks amongst the company, but we ask our clients what they need. Now, what is it you need to hear about? And if it's not AI, we don't care. Tell us what you need. We'll use our networks, and then we'll do a webinar. And we'll post that and make it available to anybody who else might need to use it. The 3% is that 3% of our profits go back into a pool and are used for organizations, nonprofits, that raise less than $1 million a year. We will subsidize 50% of their first license, so that we can make sure that no organization can say that, I just can't afford to get on there. And then 2%, the 2 is that we allow our team to spend 2% of their work time with the nonprofit of their choice. So whether they want to leave work every Friday early to go work at the local soup kitchen, or whether they want to take a week off in the summer to go build a school someplace, we afford them that opportunity. Awesome. And then finally, the 1% is that my co-founder and I have committed 1% of our equity towards the charitable space.
Yeah, congratulations. That's spectacular. And we'll have to chat about this platform. We're getting partnering with another client about getting good board members, on training on governance and whatnot, but matching them to small and medium-sized nonprofits and communities who need really good board members like crazy, and
Yep.
combine that with what you're doing, it could be fantastic. So way to go on that. The fourth industrial revolution is about tech, AI, VR, AR, you name it now. OpenAI and ChatGRP and ABC and LSD and whatever different things. But the fifth industrial revolution is about humanity now, and that's actually half the reason for our name, Fifth Element Group. The other half is SDG 5, which is about women leadership, women empowerment, etc. So we focus on, like you do, it sounds like for sure, how impact and talent come together, help you attract the best talent, help you keep making the impact, etc., to have sustainable results. When OpenAI and ChatGPT and all that became a frequent conversation now, and a lot more, what's your thoughts in general about the positive value of AI, the risks and possible negative effects of it, and how it affects humans?
Sure. So AI, we always say that the best AI team is the human machine team, because AI is going to be able to take the analytical work a human could take months to do, and it's going to do it in hours. But it doesn't have the empathy to be able to do a lot of things. And the example I always like to use in the nonprofit space is, if you relied on a machine to do fundraising, if you fired your development director, the machine would definitely find really good donors faster. And if it identified that Mark is a great major gift donor, and it called Mark and it said, "Hey, Mark, how are you doing today?" And Mark's response was, "Oh, my wife just had, an car accident. Our son just got COVID. Our other child is, got a broken arm." The machine would say, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Would you like to make a $5,000 donation today?" Because that's what it's trained to do.
Right.
The good human, the good development director, would take the information from the machine probably 90 days earlier than they would have found it, if they found it at all. And when they heard all those things, they would make a note to call a week from now, not to ask for a donation, but to check on you, to provide that human side, the humanity of, is your family doing okay? Is there anything else you need? And then maybe a month from now, once your child's recovered from COVID and everything else in the family and the household is going well, to then ask you for that donation. And so that human machine team becomes very powerful, because without the machine, the human development director may have never found you.
Right.
But if the machine was left to call you, it might not ever get that donation for it's just complete empathy with what's going on with you. And so I see a lot of opportunity with the human machine team when it comes to AI. Is there opportunity for bad? Absolutely. I was watching the news yesterday where a very prominent law professor was researched, and ChatGPT apparently said that he had what was it? He had not only a sexual assault case against him from a law student that he had taught, but then cited to I don't know, it was New York Times, Washington Post, but cited to an article, and the article and had a quote from the article from the student claiming she was assaulted on a trip to Alaska. Well, when you talk to the professor, he has never done a trip to Alaska. He's never done a trip with law students before, and he's definitely never had a sexual assault charge. So there's lots of issues that can come up. And that wasn't anybody trying to do anything bad with it. It was just an error in the system. Could someone pose it for a more negative thing? Absolutely. I watched a wonderful webinar a couple of months ago on AI in the metaverse. And so, there's people that are now spending more and more time on the metaverse.
Sure.
And it is to a point where you and I could go for a walk in the metaverse. And if there is something that, let's say I'm attracted to people with dogs.
Me too.
And I would see two people, and the AI knows that because it's collected all this data on me. I would see two people with dogs talking. Now, I'm in the metaverse. My assumption is there are two other people in the metaverse with me. But they could actually be people, they could be bots representing a company and talking very positively about that company. And because of my positive association with dogs, I'm going to associate the company. But that's AI feeding on me. Now, what's interesting is you in the metaverse at the same time with me. Let's say you're attracted to people who wear yellow hats. Both those people would have yellow hats on. and would be talking about the same company. So you and I walking together see things that the AI has determined is interesting to us and sucks us in that way. Is that good? Is that bad? Who knows? But it could be used for nefarious purposes.
Sure. Yeah, and that's going to be with anything, right? When the internet came and web, everything, there's going to be people that try to do that, and you got to look at how to use it most effectively. So it is fascinating, and it's fascinating how things have moved so quickly in the last 25, 30, 35 years. That, as one person put it to me a while back, said, were they doing the last 2,000 years? So, I mean, this, we say in LA that leave them wanting more, because then we can do a sequel. So we might have to do a sequel on this, because there's a lot to talk about. But the last question I want to ask you here is, 2020 was obviously an adventure in its own right. Whoever thought the world would close down? But maybe Mother Nature was trying to tell us something. The last few years have been crazy, blended, everything. With all that, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
I'm most grateful for my family. My immediate family, as I said, a wonderful wife, two amazing children. But I think the pandemic helped us all appreciate our extended family as well.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the challenges they face, but also what they bring to our lives. In the business realm, one of the things, and the timing was perfect, having worked with nonprofits for the number of years I have as a board member, I feel like the pandemic forced nonprofits more around the technology adoption curve in the 2 years of the pandemic than it had the previous 2 decades. And that to me is very, very important, because nonprofits up till then had always been very hesitant with technology. Hey, this is the way we've always done it. It doesn't seem broke. Why try to fix it? And the reality, again, with nonprofits operating on very lean budgets, there are a variety of ways to use technology, not just AI, but other forms of technology, just to be able to operate more efficiently and meet the needs of their constituencies. As far as what's going forward, I think there's a variety of neat things that are being looked at. It used to be a mindset that we got to have everybody in the office. And now maybe we don't need to have everybody in the office, or maybe we don't need to have them in 5 days a week. And that, to me, you go back to the humanity side, the more time we can keep people at home and with their families, I think it really bonds them to what's core. And hopefully gone are the days where it's a badge of honor to have shown up to work at 5 a.m. and not gone home till 10 p.m. And
I was at Deloitte years ago. Where were you when I needed you?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember, in the consulting world, you have ebbs and flows with clients. And I remember, there would be a week where I'd have no client, and there's not a lot of work to do, and 5 o'clock would roll around, and everybody who's on a client's going to stay till 9. And you felt almost sheepish to get up at 5 o'clock and leave the office while everybody else was working. Like, that just doesn't make sense.
Well, it goes back to what experiences or accomplishments you have rather than the time you're spending.
Absolutely.
And one thing I do find out, and thank you so much for your service, and how you've continued that into the private sector. It's impactful for sure. One thing I have found out is leadership related is people have had to trust people more who aren't sitting there right with them. And as a leader, and comparing to sports, the player will do anything for the coach that believes in them and trusts them to get the job done. So I think that's another thing that's happened. But way to go in everything you're doing, and there's no doubt you are one of the leaders who care. So congratulations, you get the golden star. And we look forward to fantastic things in the future. So thanks.
Mark, thanks for having me today. Enjoy talking with you.